You're the perfect example of wasted potential. My father's words sliced through the Thanksgiving dinner silence as relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. His bourbon sloshed dangerously close to the rim of his crystal tumbler as he gestured toward me. No real career, no ambition, just drifting through life on mediocrity. 10 minutes later, his face turned ashen when my financial advisor called with news that made everyone at the table freeze. I had just closed an 8-figure acquisition deal of my father's largest business competitor. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The crystal chandelier cast a warm glow over my parents' formal dining room as the annual Mitchell family Thanksgiving unfolded with its usual display of status and achievement. My father, Richard Mitchell, sat at the head of the table, commanding attention in his tailored blazer, silver hair perfectly coiffed, the very picture of success as defined by his generation. Surrounding him were my siblings with their impressive titles, my brother the surgeon, my sister the federal prosecutor, and their equally accomplished spouses. And then there was me, Olivia Mitchell, seated at the far end in what had become my designated spot over the years, physically and metaphorically as far from my father's approval as possible. "The gravy is delicious, Mom," I said, attempting to steer the conversation away from my brother Derek's lengthy description of his recent medical conference keynote. "Thank you, dear," my mother replied with a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Martha Mitchell had perfected the art of keeping peace at family gatherings, though her methods typically involved allowing my father's opinions to dominate. "So, Olivia?" My father's voice cut through the clink of silverware. "Still working at that little gift shop downtown?" The way he said little made it sound like a terminal illness. "Yes, I help Nina manage Heartfelt Creations," I answered evenly, taking a sip of water. "We've actually expanded to retail," he interrupted with a dismissive wave. "Selling trinkets? To tourists. You know, when you graduated from Westlake, I thought you'd actually do something with that business degree I paid for." My sister-in-law Catherine winced slightly, studying her plate with sudden interest. Even after 15 years of Mitchell family dinners, she hadn't grown immune to my father's pointed critiques. "Richard," my mother cautioned softly, "it's Thanksgiving. And I'm thankful that at least 2 of my children understood the value of ambition," he continued, raising his glass toward Derek and my sister Veronica, future chief of surgery and possibly the next district attorney. Now that's something to be proud of. I maintained my practiced smile, the one I'd perfected over years of these gatherings. At 35, I should have been immune to his disappointment. But something about returning to this house always made me feel 16 again, when my business project had placed second in the state competition, and he'd only asked why it wasn't first. "You know," my Uncle Philip interjected, "not everyone measures success the same way, Rich." My father chuckled, the sound lacking any real warmth. "Success isn't subjective, Phil. It's quantifiable. Position, influence, financial achievement." He turned his attention back to me. Olivia had every advantage: the best schools, connections through my business network, even a trust fund to get started, and chose to squander it all. "I didn't squander anything," I said quietly but firmly. "No? Then what would you call it?" His eyebrows raised in challenge. 35 years old, helping run someone else's small-town shop, living in that modest apartment, driving a car that's 10 years old now? Meanwhile, your peers from Westlake are running divisions at Fortune 500 companies. Across the table, my sister Veronica shifted uncomfortably. Despite being my father's golden child, even she occasionally found his directness excessive. "Dad, maybe we could," she began. "No, I think it's important to be honest," he continued. "Olivia, you're the perfect example of wasted potential. I've built Mitchell Financial Group from nothing into one of the top investment firms in the Northeast. Your siblings understood the value of aiming high, but you—" He took another sip of bourbon. You've chosen mediocrity at every turn. The dining room fell silent. My mother stared intently at her plate, Derek examined his wine glass, and my sister seemed suddenly fascinated by the cranberry sauce. This was the familiar choreography of Mitchell family gatherings, my father pronouncing judgment, everyone else avoiding eye contact. In previous years, I would have absorbed the blow quietly, changed the subject, or excused myself to the kitchen, the practiced routine of a lifelong disappointment. But this Thanksgiving was different. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I glanced at the screen and felt a surge of something between vindication and apprehension. The text from Eliza, my financial advisor, was brief. Harrison Capital accepted the offer. Deal closes Monday. Congratulations. For 7 years, I had maintained separate worlds: Olivia Mitchell, the unambitious daughter who helped manage a gift shop, and O.E. Mitchell, the reclusive founder of Phoenix Investments, a private equity firm that had systematically acquired undervalued companies in the financial services sector. My father had no idea that the mysterious competitor steadily purchasing regional investment firms similar to his own was actually his disappointing daughter. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Richard Mitchell belittled my life choices over holiday dinners, I had been building a financial empire that now operated in 12 states. My modest apartment was actually the entire top floor of the building I owned. The gift shop I helped manage was one of 17 businesses in my diversified portfolio, chosen because its flexible hours allowed me to run my actual business empire without scrutiny. As I looked at my father continuing his monologue about achievement and legacy, I contemplated the choice before me. I could maintain my cover, continue building Phoenix Investments behind the scenes, and perhaps one day reveal everything when the timing was perfect. Or I could end the charade right now, at this Thanksgiving table, where he had just declared me the family disappointment in front of everyone I loved. My phone buzzed again. Eliza was calling, probably with additional details about the Harrison Capital acquisition. My biggest move yet, and one that would make Phoenix Investments a direct competitor to my father's Mitchell Financial Group in 3 key markets. Excuse me, I said, rising from the table. I need to take this. My father frowned. Really, Olivia? In the middle of Thanksgiving dinner? I'm sorry, but it's important. I moved toward the doorway, then paused, turning back to face the table. Actually, I think everyone might find this interesting. I answered the call from the speaker. Eliza, I'm here with my family. Could you repeat what you just texted me? My father's expression shifted from irritation to confusion as Eliza's professional voice filled the dining room. Of course, Ms. Mitchell. I wanted to confirm that Harrison Capital has accepted your acquisition offer. The final price is $42.7 million, with closing set for Monday morning. The board voted unanimously in favor. Congratulations. This positions Phoenix as the 3rd largest independent investment firm in the region. The silence that followed felt eternal. 7 years earlier, I stood in the empty office space that would become the headquarters of Phoenix Investments, my footsteps echoing against bare walls and concrete floors. At 28, I had already learned that perception often mattered more than reality in the financial world, especially for women. Ms. Mitchell, the contractor needs your signature on these renovation plans, said Eliza Reyes, then my only employee and now my most trusted advisor. Fresh out of business school with a sharp mind for numbers and strategy, she was the first person who believed in my vision. Thanks, I replied, scanning the documents. And please, it's Olivia, or just Liv. Actually, Eliza hesitated. I've been thinking about that. In all the paperwork and business filings, you've used O.E. Mitchell. Maybe we should maintain that. Professionally, I raised an eyebrow. Any particular reason? Honestly, gender bias is real in finance. Initial communications, pitch decks, investment proposals. If they only see O.E. Mitchell, They'll judge the ideas first before making assumptions. Her expression was apologetic but firm. Later, when we've established credibility, your identity won't matter as much. I gazed out the dusty windows overlooking downtown Lake Ridge, the mid-sized city where I'd chosen to build my business, far enough from my father's sphere of influence in Boston, but close enough to understand the regional market. My father's words from my college graduation party echoed in my mind. Finance is a man's world, Olivia. You don't have the killer instinct for it. O.E. Mitchell. It is, I decided. Let's give them time to judge the business on its merits. That decision, made for practical reasons in an empty office, had evolved into something far more complex over the years. What began as a professional strategy had become a dual identity that permeated every aspect of my life. By day, I built Phoenix Investments with relentless determination. We started small, acquiring distressed local financial advisory firms, implementing modernized systems, and expanding their client bases before either selling at a profit or absorbing them into our growing network. I developed a reputation for having an uncanny ability to identify undervalued businesses with growth potential. But to my family and childhood acquaintances, I remained Olivia, who helped out at Heartfelt Creations, a gift shop owned by my college roommate Nina. The position provided the perfect cover, flexible hours, a plausible explanation for my comfortable but not extravagant lifestyle, and a reason why I couldn't always attend family functions or answer calls immediately. Nina was one of only 3 people who knew the truth. You know, most secret identities involve being a superhero, not an investment banker, she joked one evening as she locked up the shop while I finalized acquisition paperwork in the back office. Investment banker by day, retail associate by night, not exactly comic book material, I replied, signing the documents that would add another financial planning firm to Phoenix's portfolio. Why maintain the charade, though? Nina asked, not for the first time. Your business is legitimate and successful. Your father should be proud, not, she trailed off, not constantly disappointed? I finished her thought. It's complicated. At first, it was practical. I used my trust fund as seed money, and I didn't want him interfering or taking credit. Then as Phoenix grew, proving him wrong became, I searched for the right word. Important? Nina suggested. Necessary, I corrected. I needed to succeed completely on my own terms, without his connections, without his name opening doors. And part of me wanted to reveal everything at the perfect moment. Nina shook her head. The perfect moment has a way of never arriving, Liv. She was right, of course. Each year, I had envisioned different scenarios for revealing my success, perhaps when Phoenix acquired its first company valued over $10 million, or when our assets under management reached $100 million, or when we expanded into a 5th state. But with each achievement, I moved the goalpost, telling myself the revelation would be more satisfying if I waited just a little longer. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Meanwhile, family gatherings grew increasingly difficult. My father's comments about my lack of ambition evolved from concerned to dismissive to outright derisive. My siblings, thriving in their prestigious careers, didn't actively participate in his criticism, but did little to deflect it. My mother's once protective interventions had faded into resigned silence. Only my Uncle Philip, my father's younger brother who had chosen academia over finance, seemed to sense there was more to my story. You seem awfully content for someone supposedly wasting her potential, he observed quietly during a family 4th of July picnic the previous year. I had merely smiled and changed the subject. The dual identity became most challenging during periodic industry events where both Phoenix Investments and Mitchell Financial Group might be represented. I developed elaborate systems to maintain separation, sending team members to conferences I couldn't attend, wearing understated but effective disguises when necessary, and creating a corporate culture at Phoenix that valued privacy. My employees understood that O.E. Mitchell preferred to remain behind the scenes, a preference that aligned with our company philosophy of substance over flash. The quarterly projections are ready for your review. Eliza's voice pulled me back to the present, 6 months before that fateful Thanksgiving. We were in Phoenix's now elegant headquarters, expanded to occupy 3 floors of the building I had purchased outright the previous year. Thanks, I said, taking the folder. And the Harrison Capital analysis? Complete. Eliza handed me a second, thicker folder. They're undervalued by approximately 30% based on our metrics. Their client retention is excellent, but their technology infrastructure is outdated, and their marketing is virtually non-existent. With our systems and approach, we could increase profitability by 40% within 18 months. I nodded, scanning the executive summary. And their market position? They're direct competitors with Mitchell Financial in 3 key metropolitan areas, Eliza said carefully. She was one of the few people who knew Richard Mitchell was my father. This acquisition would put us in direct competition with your father's firm. I looked up from the report, my decision already made. Prepare an offer. Harrison Capital fits our acquisition criteria perfectly. The fact that it positions us against Mitchell Financial is— I paused, considering my words. An interesting coincidence. Eliza gave me a knowing look but nodded professionally. I'll have the paperwork ready by tomorrow. As she left my office, I turned to the window, gazing out at the city skyline, now visible from our top-floor location. Phoenix Investments had grown beyond my initial ambitions, currently managing over $850 million in assets with a team of 73 employees across 5 offices. We were no longer small or under the GE radar. Business publications had begun speculating about the reclusive founder of the rapidly growing firm. The Harrison acquisition would change everything, not just in terms of market position, but also in maintaining my carefully constructed dual identity. At some point, the worlds would collide. Perhaps it was time to control when and how that happened, rather than waiting for circumstances to force my hand. I picked up my phone and texted Nina. Need to reschedule my shifts next week. Big acquisition in the works. Her reply came quickly. No problem. When are you finally going to tell your family? I stared at her message for a long moment before responding. Soon. I think it's finally time. Little did I know that soon would arrive at Thanksgiving dinner, prompted by one too many remarks about wasted potential and disappointment. The first time I truly understood my father was during my sophomore year of college. I had come home for winter break, buzzing with excitement about my business economics project that had earned the highest grade in the class. Professor Jenkins had even suggested I submit it to a national competition. Dad, do you have a minute? I asked, finding him in his home office, the sanctum where Mitchell Financial Group had begun 20 years earlier. The room still maintained its original mahogany paneling and leather furniture, a deliberate reminder of his humble beginnings, even as the company now occupied 3 floors of a downtown Boston high-rise. Richard Mitchell glanced up from his computer, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. Make it quick, Olivia. I'm reviewing quarterly projections. I placed my project on his desk, a comprehensive analysis of emerging investment trends in sustainable energy. I thought you might want to see this. Professor Jenkins said it was the most insightful analysis he'd seen from an undergraduate. My father flipped through the pages with cursory interest. Sustainable energy? That's a bleeding heart fantasy. Market, not serious investing. The data suggests otherwise, I countered, pointing to my projections. Early-stage investment in these technologies shows potential returns of— Olivia, he interrupted, pushing the papers back toward me. These academic exercises are fine for classroom grades, but real financial success requires focusing on established markets, not chasing trends. It's not just a trend, Dad. The research indicates when you've managed actual client portfolios and built something substantial, then your research might interest me, he said, turning back to his computer. Derek called earlier, by the way. His medical school applications are all submitted. Harvard, Johns Hopkins, Stanford. That boy understands how to set himself up for success. I gathered my papers. The excitement I'd felt completely deflated. Right. Well, I won't keep you from your projections. That evening, I overheard him on the phone with a colleague. Thomas is joining Morgan Stanley after graduation. Top of his class, just like his father. My daughter? Olivia's still finding her way. More interested in theoretical markets than real business. No, I'm not concerned. Women often take longer to develop that killer instinct, if they ever do. Something crystallized for me that night. My father didn't just doubt my abilities. He fundamentally couldn't conceive of me succeeding in his world. The financial sector, his arena, was for men like him, men like Thomas, men with that mythical killer instinct he found so lacking in me. 3 years later, after graduating, with honors and completing a prestigious internship at Goldman Sachs, which my father dismissed as probably filling some diversity quota, I made a decision that would shape the next 7 years of my life. I'm thinking of opening a small business with Nina, I told my parents over dinner, deliberately vague about the nature of this venture. Retail? My father barely looked up from cutting his steak. That's what you want to do with your business. Degree? It's a starting point, I replied carefully. A waste is what it is, he muttered. I've told you a dozen times I could make one phone call and get you an entry-level position at any number of firms. I want to build something on my own terms. His laugh held no humor. On your own terms. That's the problem with your generation. Everyone wants to be CEO on day one. My mother intervened gently. Richard, she should explore her options. Not everyone wants to follow the traditional path. Traditional path, he scoffed. You mean the path that builds actual wealth and influence? The path that created the lifestyle she's enjoyed her entire life? I met his gaze steadily. I appreciate everything you've provided, Dad, but I need to find my own way. Fine, he said, his tone making it clear it was anything but fine. Use your trust fund for this some experiment. When reality sets in, my offer still stands. 2 weeks later, I used part of my trust fund, money from my late grandmother, not my father, as seed capital for Phoenix Investments. The modest gift, shop cover story emerged organically when Nina actually did open Heartfelt Creations and needed help with the business plan. Our arrangement benefited us both. She got free business consulting, and I got the perfect cover for my real venture. What began as a practical decision to avoid my father's interference evolved into something more complex as Phoenix grew. Each time he dismissed my little shop at family gatherings, a part of me wanted to reveal the truth. But another part, perhaps the part that had inherited his competitive nature, wanted the revelation to be perfect, irrefutable, devastating in its completeness. And so the charade continued through holidays, birthdays, and family vacations. I maintained the appearance of modest success, nice enough clothes, a comfortable apartment, reliable car, while privately amassing the kind of wealth and influence my father had never imagined I could achieve. Your brother's practice is expanding. To a second location, my mother mentioned during a Mother's Day brunch 3 years into my double life. And Veronica is being considered for the Special Prosecutorial Task Force. That's great, I replied sincerely. Despite our father's constant comparisons, I never resented my siblings' achievements. And how's the shop doing, dear? She asked, her tone gentle but tinged with the same concern that always surfaced when discussing my career. It's stable, I said truthfully, omitting that I had acquired my third financial services firm the previous month. We're thinking of expanding our online presence. My mother reached across the table to pat my hand. Your father means well. He just wants all of you to be secure. I know, Mom. Maybe if you showed more interest in the financial world. He lights up when Derek asks about investment strategies or when Veronica discusses her 401k options. I suppressed a smile at the irony. Finance isn't really my thing. That evening, I closed a deal acquiring a wealth management firm with $50 million in assets under management, negotiating terms that the seller later described as brilliantly structured. My team celebrated with champagne while I participated, via video call from my apartment, explaining I had a prior family commitment. The collision course between my two worlds accelerated when Phoenix Investments began attracting industry attention. Business journals speculated about the mystery CEO who had built such an impressive track record. Competitors, including, eventually, Mitchell Financial Group, began noticing the pattern of acquisitions that strengthened our position in specific markets. Mitchell's team has been inquiring about our strategic objectives. Marcus Thompson, my chief operating officer, informed me during a leadership meeting. They're concerned about our expansion into the northeastern market. What did we tell them? I asked, maintaining my composure despite the strange sensation of my father's company treating mine as a legitimate competitor. The standard response, Phoenix, evaluates opportunities based on client-centered metrics and long-term growth potential, Marcus replied. But they're paying attention now. It may become difficult to maintain your anonymity. I nodded, feeling the weight of the inevitable. Confrontation approaching. Let's proceed as planned. If Mitchell Financial wants to know more about Phoenix Investments, they'll have to wait like everyone else. Little did I know that everyone else would include my family, seated around a Thanksgiving table as my carefully constructed worlds finally, spectacularly collided. We should talk about Harrison Capital, Eliza said, closing the door to my office on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, 6 months before that fateful Thanksgiving dinner. She placed a folder on my desk labeled with the company's name and confidential stamped in red across the cover. I had been following Harrison Capital for nearly 2 years. Founded by Edward Harrison 30 years ago, it had grown into a respectable mid-sized investment firm with a strong client base and excellent retention rates. What made it particularly interesting was its position in 3 key metropolitan markets, all regions where Mitchell Financial Group had established dominance. The analysis is complete? I asked, opening the folder. Yes, and it confirms our initial assessment. Eliza pulled out a chair and sat across from me. Harrison is undervalued by approximately 35% based on our metrics. Their fundamentals are sound, but their technology infrastructure is outdated, and their marketing strategy is practically non-existent. I nodded, scanning the executive summary. With our systems and approach, we could increase profitability by 45% within 18 months, she finished. And the asking price? That's where it gets interesting. Eliza leaned forward. Edward. Harrison is retiring. His children aren't interested in taking over the family business. He's entertaining offers, but he's particular about who buys his company. He wants assurance that his employees will be treated fairly and his clients won't experience disruption. Values alignment, I mused. That works in our favor. It does. But there's something else. Eliza hesitated. I've confirmed that Mitchell Financial Group is preparing an offer. I looked up sharply. My father's company? Yes. According to my sources, Richard Mitchell sees Harrison Capital as a strategic acquisition to solidify his position in those markets. I sat back in my chair, processing this information. Acquiring Harrison would position Phoenix Investments in direct competition with Mitchell Financial Group, not just as a distant competitor, but as an immediate rival in key markets. It would conceal my identity as OE. Mitchell is nearly impossible. If we pursue this, I said slowly, the chances of maintaining my anonymity decrease significantly. Dramatically, Eliza corrected. I'd say it becomes virtually impossible. The business press will be all over this. Someone will inevitably Connect the dots. I stood and walked to the window, watching raindrops trace patterns on the glass. For 7 years, I had built Phoenix Investments in the shadows, away from my father's scrutiny. The company had grown beyond my wildest expectations, and I had proven to myself what I was capable of achieving. But I had always known this moment would come when I would have to choose between continued growth and continued secrecy. From a purely business perspective, I asked, is Harrison Capital the right move for Phoenix? Without question, Eliza replied without hesitation. It accelerates our 5-year plan by at least 18 months. The synergies are perfect, the cultural fit is strong, and the financial metrics are compelling. I turned back to face her. And if we factor in the personal complications? Eliza's expression softened slightly, though she maintained her professional demeanor. Liv, I've worked with you since day one. I've watched you build this company with extraordinary skill, while simultaneously maintaining this elaborate cover story for your family. You've proven everything you needed to prove. Have I? Yes. Phoenix Investments is successful by any measure. The question now isn't about proving your abilities, it's about how much longer you want to live this double life. Her words struck home. The dual identity had taken its toll over the years. The constant vigilance, the careful compartmentalization, the missed family events due to business commitments I couldn't explain. It had all created a strange isolation. I had achieved professional success beyond what my father thought possible, but at the cost of authentic connections with the people who should have been closest to me. What would you do? I asked. Professionally? I'd acquire Harrison Capital without hesitation. Personally? She paused. I think it's time O.E. Mitchell stepped out of the shadows. I nodded slowly, returning to my desk and picking up the Harrison Capital file. Prepare an offer. Let's make it compelling enough that Edward Harrison won't be tempted by my father's company. And the personal implications? I took a deep breath. I'll deal with those when the time comes. Over the next 4 months, we worked tirelessly on the Harrison Capital acquisition. Our initial offer was strong, but was met with a counter from Mitchell Financial Group, as expected. The bidding process intensified, with each side making adjustments to their proposals. What my father couldn't know was that he was competing against his own daughter, a fact that created a surreal dynamic as I read reports about Mitchell Financial's countermoves. Your father has increased their offer by 5%, Marcus reported during one strategy session. They're also emphasizing their experience in the market segments Harrison serves. Experience is valuable, I acknowledged, but innovation drives growth. Increase our offer by 7% and emphasize our technology platform and client-centric approach. As the negotiations continued, I found myself in the strange position of analyzing my father's business strategies more directly than ever before. I could see his approach clearly: aggressive on pricing, conservative on innovation, heavily reliant on established relationships and reputation. It was effective, but fundamentally different from the model I had built at Phoenix. We've received the updated financials from Harrison, Eliza announced, entering my office one afternoon in early November. Their third-quarter results exceeded projections by 12%. If anything, this strengthens the case for acquisition. I reviewed the numbers and nodded. Update our valuation model and adjust the offer accordingly. I want this deal closed before Thanksgiving. Eliza raised an eyebrow. Any particular reason for that timeline? I hesitated, then admitted, I've been thinking about what you said, about stepping out of the shadows. Maybe it's time my family learns what I've been building all these years. Are you planning to tell them at Thanksgiving dinner? She asked, surprised. I haven't decided exactly how or when, I replied. But finalizing the Harrison acquisition creates a natural moment for revelation. The business press will cover it extensively. Phoenix Investments acquiring a competitor to Mitchell Financial Group makes for a compelling story. And when they inevitably discover that O.E. Mitchell is actually Olivia Mitchell, daughter of Richard Mitchell. Eliza let the implication hang in the air. Then my father will finally understand that his disappointing daughter does, in fact, have that killer instinct he found so lacking, I finished. The decision was made. We would pursue Harrison Capital aggressively, and I would prepare for the inevitable unmasking that would follow. 7 years of separate identities would culminate in a moment of truth that would forever change my relationship with my family, especially my father. What I couldn't anticipate was exactly how that revelation would unfold, or that my father would provide the perfect opening with his Thanksgiving dinner pronouncement about my wasted potential. Managing a double life requires meticulous organization. My calendar was a carefully choreographed dance between two distinct existences: Olivia Mitchell, who helped manage Heartfelt Creations and maintained modest appearances for family gatherings, and O.E. Mitchell, founder and CEO of Phoenix Investments, who commanded respect in boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals. "Your mother called again," Nina informed me one Tuesday morning as I worked on acquisition projections in the back office of her gift shop. "She wants to know if you're coming to Derek's award dinner on Thursday." I checked my other calendar, the real one, and sighed. "I have a video conference with potential investors at 7. There's no way to reschedule." Nina leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "You know, this juggling act gets more complicated every year. At some point, you'll have to choose which life is real." "They're both real," I replied, though I knew what she meant. "Just compartmentalized." "Compartmentalized," she echoed skeptically. "Is that what we're calling it now?" The early years had been simpler. Phoenix Investments operated from a small office with minimal staff. I could genuinely help at Heartfelt Creations several days a week while building my company. As Phoenix grew, however, maintaining the charade required increasingly elaborate systems. I rented an apartment under my real name, modest but nice enough to seem plausible for someone with my supposed income. My actual residence was the penthouse. I purchased through a holding company, where I conducted video meetings and worked late into the night. I maintained separate phones, email accounts, and even different professional wardrobes. "Here's the performance breakdown by sector," Marcus Thompson, my COO, said during our quarterly leadership meeting. He was one of only 5 people who knew my true identity. "Technology and healthcare continue to outperform our benchmarks." "And the Harrison acquisition?" I asked, scanning the reports. "We're making progress. Their board is reviewing our latest offer this week." I nodded, checking my watch. "I need to leave by 4. Family dinner." Marcus gave me a knowing look. "Still playing the underachieving daughter?" "Until the moment's right," I confirmed. The leadership team had grown accustomed to my occasional early departures for family obligations. They respected my privacy and appreciated that despite my unconventional arrangement, I remained fully engaged with the business. Phoenix's success spoke for itself. Our growth trajectory had outpaced projections for 6 consecutive years. That evening, I arrived at my parents' suburban home for my brother's birthday dinner. I had changed from my power suit into casual attire, removed my professional makeup, and shifted my entire demeanor from commanding CEO to unassuming daughter. "Olivia, you made it," my mother greeted me at the door. "Derek just got here. He was telling us about the research grant his department received." "That's wonderful," I replied, genuinely happy for my brother despite knowing what would follow. Predictably, dinner conversation revolved around my siblings' achievements. Derek's expanding medical practice, Veronica's recent courtroom victory, their spouses' respective accomplishments. My father beamed with pride as Derek described the medical conference where he'd been invited to present. "What about you, Liv?" Derek asked, kindly trying to include me. "How's the shop doing?" "It's steady," I replied with practiced modesty. "We're launching a new line of locally sourced products next month." "That's nice," my father commented, the slight pause communicating his perpetual disappointment more clearly than any words could. "Local crafts. Very quaint. I smiled and took a sip of wine. Just that morning, I had approved a $2.5 million technology upgrade for Phoenix's investment analysis systems, a cutting-edge platform that would give us a significant competitive advantage. The previous week, I had negotiated terms with a Singapore-based investment group interested in our international expansion strategy. My father continued, oblivious to the irony. You know, Jenkins's daughter started at Goldman Sachs last year, already making her mark in derivatives trading. Good for her, I said mildly. If you ever wanted to explore opportunities in actual finance, he offered, not for the first time. I still have connections. I suppressed a smile. I'm happy where I am, Dad. Later, as my mother served coffee in the living room, my phone buzzed with a text from Eliza. Harrison board meeting running. Late. Decision expected tonight. Call when you can. Work? My father asked, noticing my distraction. Just Nina with a question about inventory. I lied smoothly. He nodded, dismissing the matter entirely. As I was saying, Mitchell Financial just landed. The Westridge account. $30 million in assets under management. That's how you build a legacy in this business. I forced myself not to react. Phoenix had recently declined to pursue Westridge, finding their risk profile incompatible with our investment philosophy. The irony of my father boasting about an account we had strategically passed on was almost too perfect. These moments of dramatic irony punctuated my dual existence. I became adept at compartmentalizing, at shifting between worlds with practiced ease. Yet the strain of maintaining the deception grew heavier as Phoenix's success accelerated. I passed a profile of you to Jessica, my mother mentioned as I prepared to leave that evening. Jessica was the daughter of her tennis partner, a recent business school graduate. She's struggling to find direction after graduation. I thought you might mentor her. I blinked in surprise. Me? Why not Dad or someone with more corporate experience? Because, my mother said softly, you found your own path. You seem content. Olivia, not everyone wants the pressure of what your father considers success. Her words hit me unexpectedly. In her own way, my mother had recognized something genuine in my fabricated life, a sense of self-determination my siblings hadn't experienced. The irony was painful. She admired my supposed rejection of status and achievement, unaware that I had simply pursued success on my own terms. Thanks, Mom. I'll reach out to her. Driving away, I called Eliza for the Harrison update. The board meeting just concluded, she reported. They're leaning toward our offer, but your father's company has made a final push. We'll know for certain by the end of the week. Keep me posted, I instructed. If we need to adjust our offer, I want options ready immediately. The dual life created strange contradictions. I was simultaneously the disappointing daughter and the formidable competitor. My father dismissed my career choices over dinner, then returned to his office to strategize against my company without realizing the connection. As Phoenix grew more visible and successful, close calls became inevitable. Business journals began speculating about O.E. Mitchell, the reclusive founder of the rapidly expanding investment firm. Industry events required careful navigation. I would decline speaking engagements, send representatives, or occasionally appear briefly with subtle changes to my appearance that made recognition unlikely. The Bloomberg reporter is particularly persistent, my communications director warned during a planning meeting. They want a profile on you for their emerging leaders series. Maintain our standard position, I instructed. O.E. Mitchell prefers to let results speak for themselves. With the Harrison acquisition moving forward, media interest will intensify, she cautioned. We should prepare for increased scrutiny. She was right, of course. The elaborate construction of my dual identity was reaching its inevitable tipping point. Phoenix Investments had grown too significant to remain in the shadows. and the Harrison acquisition would thrust us directly into the spotlight. As Thanksgiving approached and the Harrison negotiations entered their final stage, I knew the carefully compartmentalized worlds I had maintained for 7 years were about to collide. The only question remaining was whether I would control the narrative of that collision, or whether circumstances would force my hand. The first real close call happened during year 3 of my double life. I was attending the Northeast Financial Leadership Conference, a necessary appearance for Phoenix Investments as we expanded our regional presence. Though I typically avoided such events, this particular conference was crucial for networking with potential acquisition targets. I arrived late, slipped into the back of the main hall during a panel discussion, and kept a low profile. My appearance that day included dark-rimmed glasses, hair styled differently than I wore it with family, and a power suit I never would have worn around my father. These small disguises had proven surprisingly effective. As the panel concluded and attendees mingled during the coffee break, I spotted my father across the room, surrounded by his usual crowd of industry veterans. I froze momentarily, calculating the risk of remaining versus the suspicion leaving might create. Before I could decide, a voice beside me shattered my concentration. Olivia? Olivia Mitchell? I turned to find James Peterson, a former classmate from business school. He had worked briefly at Goldman Sachs during my internship there. James, I managed, lowering my voice slightly from its usual professional register. What a surprise. I almost didn't recognize you, he said, glancing at my glasses and professional attire. You look different. What brings you to a financial conference? Last I heard you were in retail or something. From the corner of my eye, I could see my father still engaged in conversation, oblivious to my presence. Just exploring options, I replied vaguely. A client of the shop is interested in expanding into financial advisory services. I'm doing some preliminary research. James nodded, though he looked skeptical. Well, if you're considering getting back into finance, you should meet my boss. We're expanding our wealth management division. He began steering me toward a group near the windows, unfortunately moving us closer to where my father stood. Actually, I said quickly, checking my watch, I have a call scheduled in 5 minutes, but take my card and we can connect later. I handed him a specially prepared card that listed my personal email rather than my Phoenix Investments contact information. As I turned to leave, I nearly collided with Edward Harrison, the very person whose company would become the focal point of bidding between Phoenix and Mitchell Financial 3 years later. Excuse me, I said, attempting to step around him. Harrison paused, studying me with interest. You're O.E. Mitchell, aren't you? From Phoenix Investments? My stomach dropped. Nearby, my father's head turned slightly at the mention of Phoenix, the competitor he had recently begun noticing in several markets. I'm afraid you're mistaken, I replied smoothly, extending my hand. Olivia Evans, Harborview Consulting, but I'm familiar with Phoenix's work. Impressive innovation in traditional markets. Harrison shook my hand, looking confused. My apologies. The resemblance is remarkable. I had a brief meeting with Mitchell last month and could have sworn. No harm done, I assured him, acutely aware that my father was now looking in our direction, his expression curious. If you'll excuse me, I have a call scheduled. I navigated quickly through the crowd and out of the conference hall, heart pounding. In the taxi back to my office, I called Marcus. We have a problem, I said without preamble. Edward Harrison nearly identified me at the conference, within earshot of my father. How bad? Marcus asked. Not catastrophic, but concerning. I played it off, but Harrison seemed certain. And worse, he mentioned Phoenix and my name. Well, O.E. Mitchell, loudly enough that my father noticed. That evening, I received a text from my father. Ran into Edward Harrison today. He mentioned Phoenix Investments making waves in the regional market. Might be worth researching their approach if you ever decide to get serious about finance. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so nerve-wracking. My father was suggesting I study my own company as a learning opportunity. After the E. Harrison incident, we implemented stricter protocols. I drastically reduced public appearances, sending representatives to most industry events. When I did attend, I used more comprehensive disguises and operated under strict time limits. Phoenix's marketing materials never included my photograph, and press releases referred to the founder or leadership team, rather than specifically naming me. These measures worked for a time, but as Phoenix grew more prominent, maintaining anonymity became increasingly challenging. 4 years into my double life, an industry publication named Phoenix Investments one of the top 10 financial innovators to watch and requested an interview with the founder. We declined, but couldn't prevent the publication from running a speculative profile. They don't have a confirmed photograph, my PR director assured me, but they're planning to use a stock image and mention that O.E. Mitchell is notoriously private. I nodded, reviewing the press monitoring report. What else are they saying? Mostly positive. They're highlighting our technology platform, client retention rates, and acquisition strategy. There's significant interest in your background, but with minimal personal information available, they're focusing on business achievements. The article published the following week, describing O.E. Mitchell as the financial world's most intriguing mystery, a brilliant strategist who has built a formidable firm while remaining almost completely unknown. At Sunday dinner that weekend, my brother Derek arrived with the magazine tucked under his arm. "Have you seen this?" he asked my father, flipping to the article. "Phoenix Investments. They're using that algorithm-based portfolio management system I was telling you about for my practice's retirement plan." My father took the magazine, skimming the article with interest. Impressive growth metrics. Their approach to targeted acquisitions is particularly noteworthy. I focused intently on my plate, maintaining a neutral expression as my father unknowingly praised my business strategy. "The founder seems interesting," Derek continued. "Completely private, no public appearances. Dad, have you ever crossed paths with this O.E. Mitchell?" "No," my father replied, still studying the article. "Mitchell Financial has encountered Phoenix in several markets recently, but their leadership remains elusive. Unusual in this industry, most successful founders can't wait to see their faces on magazine covers." He looked up suddenly, turning to me. "Olivia, you went to business school. Ever hear of this Mitchell person?" I nearly choked on my water, but recovered quickly. "No, never, but I've been out of those circles for years." My father sighed, his disappointment evident. "That's precisely the problem. You could have been building something substantial like this Mitchell person, instead of selling scented candles." The irony was so perfect I had to excuse myself to the kitchen, ostensibly to help my mother, but actually to compose myself. These near misses became more frequent as Phoenix continued its expansion. The most dangerous moment came when my father's company and Phoenix found ourselves competing for the same boutique wealth management firm in Vermont. Both companies sent representatives to meet with the owner. Mitchell Financial sent my father's protege, while I felt compelled to handle the meeting personally given the strategic importance of the acquisition. By sheer luck, the meetings were scheduled on different days. When I arrived, however, the owner mentioned my father's company immediately. "Richard Mitchell's team made a compelling offer yesterday," he said as we sat down in his office. "They emphasized their traditional approach and established reputation." I nodded professionally, hiding my surprise at hearing my father's name. Mitchell Financial is certainly well established. At Phoenix, we offer a different value proposition through our technology platform and client-centered approach. Later, when we successfully acquired the firm, my father mentioned the lost opportunity at a family gathering. That Vermont situation was disappointing. Lost it to Phoenix again. This Mitchell is becoming a genuine irritant. If only he knew that the genuine irritant was sitting across the dinner table, passing him the mashed potatoes. As Phoenix continued growing and winning, against my father's company with increasing frequency, I sensed his frustration building. Mitchell Financial had dominated its markets for decades before this mysterious competitor began systematically challenging their position. What would happen when he discovered that his own daughter, the disappointment of the family, was the architect of his competitive challenges? That question would soon be answered as the Harrison Capital acquisition moved toward its conclusion. Mitchell Financial has increased their offer by another 4%, Eliza reported, entering my office with a concerned expression 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. That's their third adjustment. Your father is pulling out all the stops to win Harrison. I studied the updated figures on the tablet she handed me. The bidding war for Harrison Capital had intensified beyond our initial projections. What had begun as a straightforward acquisition opportunity had evolved into something more personal, at least from my father's perspective. He's offering well above market value now, I observed. This isn't just strategic for him anymore. No, Eliza agreed. According to our sources, Richard Mitchell has taken personal control of the negotiation. Apparently, he told his board that beating Phoenix on this deal is a matter of principle. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. A matter of principle? Interesting choice of words. There's more, Eliza continued. Harrison mentioned to our acquisition team that your father specifically referenced O.E. Mitchell during their last meeting. Said something about teaching this upstart a lesson about respecting established industry leaders. The surge of competitive spirit I felt surprised me. For years, I had maintained my dual identity partly out of necessity, partly out of a desire to prove myself without my father's shadow. But now, as his company and mine directly competed for the same acquisition target, something shifted. This wasn't just about proving my capabilities anymore. It was about winning on the very playing field he had always insisted I couldn't compete. Increase our offer by 5%, I decided, and emphasize our technology integration plan and employee retention guarantees. Harrison cares about his legacy and his people. That matters more to him than squeezing out the last dollar. We're already offering a premium, Eliza cautioned. Another 5% pushes the boundaries of what our financial models justify. The synergies with our existing portfolio make it worthwhile, I countered. And strategically, Harrison gives us precisely the market position we need to accelerate our 5-year plan. What I didn't articulate was the personal satisfaction I would feel winning this acquisition against my father. A satisfaction I wasn't entirely proud of, but couldn't deny. Eliza studied me carefully. This isn't just business for you anymore either, is it? I met her gaze evenly. It's always been both personal and professional, Eliza. From the day I started Phoenix. She nodded slowly. I'll prepare the revised offer. As the Harrison negotiations intensified, maintaining my dual identity became increasingly difficult. The financial press was following the bidding war with growing interest, Phoenix and Mitchell. Financial had emerged as the final contenders for what was being described as a pivotal acquisition that could reshape regional investment services. My phone rang during dinner with my parents the following week. Seeing Eliza's name, I excused myself to take the call in the hallway. Harrison's board is meeting tomorrow morning, she said without preamble. Final decision expected by noon. Your father's team submitted what they're calling their best and final offer this afternoon. Have we confirmed the details? Yes. It's aggressive, but still focused on financial terms rather than operational integration or client experience. So, typical of Mitchell Financial, I said, forgetting momentarily that I was in my parents' home. All price, no vision. Mitchell Financial? My father's voice came from behind me. I turned to find him standing in the doorway, his expression curious. Are you discussing my company, Olivia? I recovered quickly. Just something I overheard? At the shop today, a client was talking about investment firms. He raised an eyebrow. And you have opinions on investment strategy now? Just repeating what I heard, I said with a practiced smile. I should take this call. Work issue with inventory. His skepticism was evident, but he returned to the dining room while I finished my conversation with Eliza, instructing her to submit our final offer with enhanced terms for client transition and employee retention. When I returned to the table, my father was discussing the Harrison acquisition with my mother, unaware of my interest in the conversation. Edward Harrison built that company from nothing, he was saying. 30 years of solid, traditional investment management. Now he's retiring, and I intend to ensure his legacy continues under the right leadership. Not the Phoenix Company? My mother asked innocently. My father's expression darkened. Absolutely not. Phoenix represents everything wrong with modern finance, prioritizing technology over relationships, disruption over stability. Harrison deserves better than having his life's work dismantled by some algorithm-obsessed upstart. I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to defend my company's approach. Phoenix's technology platform was specifically designed to enhance client relationships, not replace them, something my father would know if he bothered to look beyond his biases. You seem very invested in this acquisition, I observed carefully. It's become something of a crusade, he admitted, refilling his wine glass. Mitchell Financial and firms like Harrison built this industry on personal trust and long-term thinking. Companies like Phoenix are trying to reduce everything to data points and quarterly returns. The misconception of my business philosophy was almost painful to hear. Phoenix had the highest client retention rate in the industry precisely because we combined innovative technology with personalized service. Our quarterly returns were excellent, but our focus was unmistakably long-term. Maybe Phoenix has something valuable to offer, I suggested mildly. Innovation isn't always a threat to tradition. My father laughed dismissively. That sounds like something someone with no understanding of the industry would say. No offense, Olivia, but financial services requires expertise you simply haven't developed while selling handcrafted jewelry. I smiled tightly. None taken. Later that night, I called Marcus from my car. I need contingency plans for the Harrison announcement. If we win, the press coverage will be significant. We need to be prepared for my identity to become public. We've been developing scenarios, he confirmed. The PR team has drafted statements explaining your privacy choices in positive terms, emphasizing your focus on results rather than publicity. And if my father's company wins? I asked, though the possibility seemed increasingly unlikely based on our intelligence. Then we pivot immediately to the next acquisition target on our list. The Westlake Group has already indicated interest in preliminary discussions. The following morning, I sat in my office at Phoenix headquarters, waiting for news from Harrison's board meeting. The tension was palpable throughout our leadership team. This acquisition would be our largest to date, positioning Phoenix as a clear rival to established firms like Mitchell Financial in multiple markets. At 11:47 a.m., my phone rang. It was Edward Harrison himself. Ms. Mitchell, he began, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I wanted to deliver this news personally. Our board has voted unanimously to accept Phoenix's offer. Relief and triumph washed over me. Thank you, Edward. We're committed to honoring your legacy and taking excellent care of your clients and team. I believe that, he said. Your vision for the future aligned with our values in ways your father's proposal simply didn't, which leads me to an awkward question. Does Richard know about your role at Phoenix? I hesitated. Not yet, but he will soon. Harrison chuckled softly. That will be quite a revelation. For what it's worth, I think he's underestimated you significantly. That's been a lifelong pattern, I replied, surprising myself with the candor. After concluding the call, I gathered my executive team to share the news. The Harrison acquisition was moving forward, with closing scheduled for the Monday after Thanksgiving. The announcement would go public Wednesday morning, the day before Thanksgiving. Perfect timing, Nina remarked that evening when I stopped by the shop to explain why I wouldn't be working my usual hours the following week. How so? I asked. Well, you'll finally have something impressive to share at Thanksgiving dinner, she said with a mischievous smile. When your father inevitably asks about your disappointing career choices. I hadn't considered that perspective, but she was right. For the first time in 7 years, I would be heading to Thanksgiving dinner with the option to reveal my true professional identity, backed by the acquisition of a company my father had desperately wanted. The question remaining was whether I would choose that moment to end the charade or whether circumstances would force my hand. Either way, this would be a Thanksgiving my family would never forget. The Wednesday morning before Thanksgiving dawned clear and cold. I stood at the eats-your floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse, coffee in hand, watching the city come to life below. Today, Phoenix Investments would announce its acquisition of Harrison Capital, a $42.7 million deal that would position us as a direct competitor to Mitchell Financial in 3 key markets. My phone chimed with a text from Eliza. Press release. Goes out at 9 a.m. Financial news channels are already speculating. Your father's company has scheduled an investor call at 11. I could only imagine how that call would go. Richard Mitchell explaining to shareholders why Mitchell Financial had lost a critical acquisition to their emerging rival, Phoenix Investments. What he couldn't possibly know was how personal that loss would feel once he discovered who had orchestrated it. As I dressed for the day, selecting a power suit I never would have worn to family gatherings, I contemplated the decision before me. For 7 years, I had maintained my dual identity, building Phoenix in secret while enduring my father's condescension about my supposed lack of ambition. The acquisition announcement would bring intense media scrutiny to Phoenix and its reclusive founder. My identity would likely be discovered regardless of my intentions. The question was whether to control the narrative by revealing myself on my own terms. At 8:55, I called Eliza from my office at Phoenix headquarters. Is everything ready? All set, she confirmed. PR team standing by, social media monitoring in place, statements prepared for media inquiries. The question is how much personal information we're willing to disclose when they inevitably ask about O.E. Mitchell. I took a deep breath. Let's maintain our standard position for now. O.E. Mitchell prefers to let results speak for themselves. We'll assess the situation as it develops. At precisely 9 m, the announcement went live across Business Wire services. Phoenix Investments acquires Harrison Capital in $42.7 million deal. Within minutes, financial news outlets began reporting the story, highlighting the strategic significance of the acquisition and speculating about what it meant for regional market dynamics. By 9:30, my father called. I stared at his name on my phone screen, knowing this conversation would require careful navigation. Part of me wanted to let it go, to voicemail, but that would only delay the inevitable. Good morning, Dad, I answered, keeping my voice casual. Olivia, he said, his tone clipped. Bad news this morning. That Phoenix outfit beat us to Harrison Capital. Announced it about 30 minutes ago. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, neutrally. I know you were hoping to acquire them. It's more than disappointing. It's infuriating, he continued. We offered full market value plus a premium. Harrison turned us down for this upstart with their algorithms and digital platforms. 30 years of industry relationships counted for nothing. I bit back a defense of Phoenix's approach, reminding myself that revealing my connection now, over the phone, would be neither strategic nor satisfying. Maybe their vision for the future was more compelling, I suggested mildly. My father scoffed. Vision without foundation is just fantasy, Olivia. Something you'd understand if you'd developed actual business expertise. The familiar sting of his dismissal was tempered by the irony of the situation. If only he knew he was complaining to the very person who had outmaneuvered him. I'm sure you'll find another acquisition target, I offered. That's not the point, he snapped. This Mitchell person is deliberately targeting markets where we've been established for decades. It's becoming personal. More than you know, I thought. Anyway, he continued, his voice shifting to a marginally more pleasant tone. I'm calling because your mother wants to confirm you're still coming to Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow. Of course, I assured him. I wouldn't miss it. Good. And Olivia? Try to arrive on time. Your brother is bringing his new research fellow, and we'd like to make a good impression. After hanging up, I sat quietly for a moment, processing the conversation. My father's reaction to losing Harrison was exactly as I'd expected. Frustration combined with dismissal of Phoenix's approach, plus a personal slight directed at me. What I hadn't anticipated was how hollow his criticism would feel now. For years, his disapproval had affected me deeply. Now, sitting in my office after outmaneuvering him in a major business deal, I realized his opinion had lost much of its power. I had built something significant entirely on my own terms. The fact that he couldn't see my achievement didn't diminish it. My reflections were interrupted by Eliza knocking on my door. "We need to talk," she said, her expression serious as she entered. "Bloomberg is running a special segment on the acquisition at noon. They're focusing on the mysterious founder angle. They've been digging." "How much have they discovered?" I asked. "They know OE stands for Olivia Elizabeth. They've connected Phoenix Investments to a holding company registered in your name. It's only a matter of time before they make the connection to Richard Mitchell." I nodded, unsurprised. The financial press employed talented investigative journalists who specialized in uncovering exactly this type of information. "What's our exposure timeline?" "Hours, not days," Eliza replied. "By this evening, they'll likely have enough to run with the story. Certainly by tomorrow morning. Thanksgiving morning. The timing couldn't be more dramatic if I had planned it. Prepare a statement acknowledging my identity, I decided. We'll release it reactively when the press makes the connection. Emphasize my focus on building the business rather than seeking publicity. Make no mention of my father unless directly asked. As Eliza left to implement these instructions, Marcus appeared at my door. "The Mitchell financial investor call just concluded," he reported. "Your father took a confrontational stance, describing Phoenix as aggressive disruptors without appreciation for established industry practices. He specifically mentioned you, well, O.E. Mitchell, as a mysterious figure hiding behind technology, rather than building personal relationships." I couldn't help but smile at the characterization. If only he knew how personal this actually is. "There's more," Marcus continued. "He publicly committed to aggressive countermeasures. Said Mitchell Financial would teach Phoenix and its founder a lesson about the importance of respect in this industry." Bold words, I observed, especially from someone who just lost a major acquisition battle. "The financial press is loving the conflict narrative," Marcus added. "They're already calling it a David versus Goliath situation, the established industry titan against the innovative upstart." By late afternoon, the inevitable happened. My assistant forwarded an email from a Bloomberg reporter that had been sent to Phoenix's media relations address. "Our research indicates that O.E. Mitchell is Olivia Elizabeth Mitchell, daughter of Richard Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Financial Group. We are preparing a story on this connection and what it means for the Harrison Capital acquisition. We welcome Ms. Mitchell's comments before our deadline at 7 p.m. I stared at the message, feeling a strange sense of relief. The moment of revelation was here, forced by circumstances rather than my choice. The question now was not whether my dual identity would be exposed, but how I would handle the aftermath, particularly at tomorrow's Thanksgiving dinner. "Release our prepared statement," I instructed our communications director. "Confirm my identity, but emphasize that this has never been about personal connections. It's about building an innovative investment firm focused on results rather than personalities." As evening fell, Bloomberg broke the story. Financial industry. Stunned, Phoenix Investments founder revealed as daughter of rival CEO. Within hours, every business publication had picked up the angle, with headlines ranging from family finance feud to Mitchell versus Mitchell, the acquisition battle that became personal. My phone exploded with notifications, texts from friends, who suddenly realized what I'd been building, emails from industry colleagues expressing surprise and admiration, and finally, a single text from my mother. Your father just saw the news. Please call before tomorrow. I didn't call. Some conversations needed to happen in person. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving dinner would provide the perfect setting for a long overdue reckoning. Sleep eluded me that night. I stood at my penthouse windows, watching the city lights, mentally preparing for the confrontation that awaited me at Thanksgiving dinner. My phone continued buzzing with notifications. Industry colleagues, former classmates, even competitors sending messages of surprise and, in many cases, congratulations. Around midnight, Derek called. Were you ever going to tell us? He asked when I answered, his tone more curious than accusatory. Eventually, I replied, though I hadn't planned on Bloomberg making the announcement for me. 800 million in assets under management live, a team of 70 people. That's extraordinary. Thanks. Dads. He hesitated. Well, upset doesn't quite capture it. He's been on the phone all evening with his board and legal team. Mom had to bring his blood pressure medication. I sighed. Is he planning to come to dinner tomorrow? Oh, he's insisting the dinner proceed exactly as planned. Says canceling would show weakness. Derek's attempt to mimic our father's authoritative tone almost made me smile despite the tension. I think he's viewing Thanksgiving dinner as some sort of corporate showdown. That's absurd, I said, though I'd been thinking of it in similar terms myself. Is it? Derek asked. You've been building a competing company in secret for 7 years while letting him believe you were just helping at Nina's shop. I don't even know what that is. It's complicated, I offered, knowing how inadequate the explanation sounded. No kidding. He paused. For what it's worth, I think. It's incredible what you've built. I just wish I'd known my sister was a financial genius all these years, instead of listening to Dad's commentary on your wasted potential. His words touched me. Derek had always been kind, if somewhat absorbed in his own achievements. He'd never been actively dismissive of my supposed career choices, but he hadn't challenged our father's narrative either. I should have told you, I admitted. It just became easier to maintain the separation between my personal and professional lives. The longer it went on, the harder it became to correct, he finished for me. I get it. Sort of. But tomorrow's going to be intense. Veronica is already preparing counter-arguments like it's a court case. She's taking Dad's side? I asked, unsurprised but still disappointed. Actually, I think she's impressed but processing. You know how she deals with emotional situations, by treating them like legal proceedings. After we hung up, I spent several hours reviewing briefing materials for the Harrison integration that would begin Monday. Work had always been my refuge, the place where my competence was never questioned. Tonight, it provided a welcome distraction from the family drama unfolding. By morning, the story had escalated. CNBC ran a special segment titled Hidden Heir: How Richard Mitchell's Daughter Built a Rival Empire Under His Nose. The coverage was more favorable than I had anticipated, portraying me as an innovative underdog who had proven herself in a traditionally male-dominated industry. My PR director sent a media summary at 7 a.m. Overwhelmingly positive coverage focusing on Phoenix's growth trajectory and innovative approach. Your privacy is being framed as strategic rather than deceptive. Mitchell Financial's stock opened down 3% in pre-market trading on concerns about leadership and competitive positioning. That last point would particularly irritate my father. Nothing bothered him more than seeing the company's stock price affected by what he would consider media theatrics. I dressed carefully for Thanksgiving dinner, selecting an outfit that balanced professional confidence with family appropriateness. Dark, tailored slacks, a silk blouse, and a subtle gold necklace that I often wore to important meetings. No power suit, but nothing that screamed underachieving daughter either. As I drove to my parents' suburban home, calls continued coming in. I let most go to voicemail, but answered when Edward Harrison's name appeared. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Your holiday," he began. "Not at all," I assured him. "What can I do for you, Edward?" I just wanted to say that watching the news coverage has been illuminating. When we accepted Phoenix's offer, we knew we were choosing the right company for Harrison Capital's future. What I didn't fully appreciate was the personal courage behind that company. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "That means a lot coming from you." "Your father called me this morning," he continued, his tone shifting. "He was, shall we say, less than gracious. Suggested I had made the decision based on gender politics rather than business fundamentals." I sighed. "I'm sorry about that. My father has strong opinions about what constitutes legitimate business expertise." "Indeed. I informed him that I chose Phoenix because your technological infrastructure, client retention metrics, and growth strategy were superior, not because of or despite who you are." He seemed unconvinced. "That sounds like my father." "In any case," Harrison continued, "I wanted you to know that I stand firmly behind our decision, and I look forward to watching Phoenix continue to grow under your leadership." The support was heartening, but it also heightened my awareness of what was at stake. This wasn't just a family revelation anymore. It had implications for clients, employees, and the broader industry. How my father and I navigated today would set the tone for the business relationship between Phoenix and Mitchell Financial moving forward. As I pulled into my parents' driveway, I noticed additional cars beyond, the usual family vehicles. My father had apparently invited his chief operating officer and chief legal counsel to Thanksgiving dinner, a clear indication he was viewing this as a business confrontation rather than a family matter. My mother opened the door before I could ring the bell, pulling me into a tight hug. "Oh, Olivia," she whispered. "Why didn't you tell us?" "It's a long story, Mom," I said, returning her embrace. "Is Dad here?" She nodded, releasing me to look at my face. "In his study with Walter and James. He's been there since the news broke last night." Walter and James, his COO and legal counsel, exactly as I'd suspected. Derek and Veronica are in the living room with their spouses. And, well, your father asked me to tell you that Phoenix Investments would be the only topic of conversation at dinner. Did he now? I found myself smiling despite the tension. Well, that's convenient. I have quite a lot to say on the subject. My mother looked worried. "Olivia, please, this is still Thanksgiving dinner. Whatever business disagreements you and your father have—" "This isn't just a business disagreement, Mom," I interrupted gently. "This is about 7 years of being dismissed and underestimated by my own father. 7 years of building something significant while being treated like a disappointment." Her expression softened. "I know. And that's partly my fault, too. I should have challenged his assumptions, more forcefully." She squeezed my arm. "For what it's worth, I'm incredibly proud of what you've accomplished." As we walked toward the living room, I steeled myself for what would undoubtedly be a challenging afternoon. The family dynamics were complicated enough, but with my father bringing his executive team, he had clearly escalated this to a corporate conflict. What he failed to understand was that I had been preparing for this confrontation for 7 years. While he had been dismissing my capabilities, I had been honing them in the most competitive industry possible. If he wanted to treat Thanksgiving dinner like a boardroom showdown, he would quickly discover that his disappointing daughter was more than prepared. Derek and Veronica rose from their seats when I entered the living room. My brother crossed the space to give me a quick hug. "Quite the morning headline," he murmured, his tone equal parts impressed and concerned. Veronica maintained her professional composure, the same expression she wore in courtroom photographs, but I detected a hint of admiration in her eyes. "Your PR team is excellent," she observed. "The narrative framing is masterful." "Thank you," I replied simply, though I'd prefer if the story hadn't broken the night before Thanksgiving. Catherine, Derek's wife, shook her head in amazement. "All these years we thought you were just— the shop is lovely, but 800 million in assets under management," Veronica's husband Julian finished. It's extraordinary." Despite the tension of the situation, I felt an unexpected sense of validation. For the first time, my family was seeing me clearly, not as the underachieving Mitchell, but as a successful founder and CEO in my own right. "Where's Riley?" I asked, noticing Derek's research fellow was missing. "Dad asked him not to come," Derek explained, looking uncomfortable. "Said it was a family matter now. Yet he invited his executive team," I observed dryly. Derek shrugged apologetically. "You know, Dad, double standards are his specialty." The study door opened, and my father emerged with Walter Chen, his COO, and James Harrington, Mitchell Financial's chief legal counsel. My father's expression was rigid, his posture unnaturally stiff as he crossed the room without acknowledging my presence. "Martha," he addressed my mother with forced calm. "Is dinner ready?" My mother glanced anxiously between us. "Yes, everything's prepared. Shall we move to the dining room?" The procession to the dining room felt almost ceremonial in its formality. My father took his usual place at the head of the table but disrupted the traditional seating arrangement by placing Walter and James on either side of him, positions typically reserved for Derek and Veronica. The message was clear. This was no longer just a family dinner, but a strategic confrontation. I found myself directed to the far end of the table, directly opposite my father. Another strategic placement, maximizing the physical distance between us while positioning me as his adversary. I took my seat without comment, maintaining the composed professional demeanor I had perfected in countless negotiations. My mother, looking increasingly distressed, placed the turkey at the center of the table. "Perhaps we should begin with what we're thankful for this year," she suggested, attempting to restore some semblance of holiday tradition. "An excellent idea," my father agreed, his voice carrying an undercurrent of tension. "I'm thankful for transparency and honesty in both personal and professional relationships. Rare qualities these days, it seems." The barb hung in the air as uncomfortable glances were exchanged around the table. "I'll go next," I said evenly. "I'm thankful for the opportunity to build something meaningful on my own terms, and for finally being able to share that achievement with my family." My father's jaw tightened visibly, but before he could respond, my mother quickly served the turkey, desperately trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. For several minutes, the only sounds were the clinking of silverware and murmured requests to pass various dishes. Walter Chen, ever the tactical operator, broke the silence first. "Ms. Mitchell, please, call me Olivia," I interjected. "We are at Thanksgiving dinner, after all." Walter nodded stiffly. "Olivia, then. I must say, Phoenix's technology infrastructure is impressive. Your client dashboard analytics particularly." He paused. "Had you shared your ideas with Mitchell Financial first, we might have implemented similar systems." "I doubt that very much," I replied pleasantly. My proposals for modernizing investment analytics were dismissed as trendy distractions during my internship at Goldman Sachs. I believe my father used similar language when discussing Phoenix's approach just last week. My father set down his fork with deliberate precision. "If this is about proving me wrong, this isn't about you at all," I countered calmly. "Phoenix Investments exists because I saw an opportunity to serve clients differently. The fact that you consistently underestimated my capabilities was a personal disappointment, but not a business motivation. Yet you deliberately concealed your role," James Harrington noted, slipping into lawyer mode. That suggests awareness of a potential conflict of interest. There was no conflict when I founded Phoenix, I explained. We operated in entirely different markets initially. As we expanded and our territories began to overlap, I maintained separation between my personal and professional identities precisely to avoid complications. Complications, my father repeated, his voice rising slightly. Is that what you call building a competing firm in secret while sitting at this table listening to my business strategies for 7 years? I never used any information gained from family discussions, I stated firmly. Phoenix's success is based on our innovative approach and execution, not on inside information about Mitchell Financial. And the Harrison acquisition? Walter asked. Eyebrows raised. Coincidence that you targeted a company we were actively pursuing? Not at all, I replied honestly. Harrison represents a strategic opportunity that aligns with Phoenix's growth plans. The fact that Mitchell Financial was also interested simply confirms we both recognized its value. My father's expression darkened. You outbid us deliberately. We made a competitive offer based on our analysis of Harrison's value to Phoenix, I corrected. Edward Harrison chose our proposal because our vision for his company's future was more compelling than yours. His words, not mine. The tension at the table was palpable. My mother looked increasingly distressed while Derek and Veronica observed the exchange with expressions ranging from concern to fascination. Why maintain the charade, Olivia? Veronica asked, her prosecutorial instincts evident. You could have revealed your success years ago. It was the central question, the one I had asked myself repeatedly over the years. The answer had evolved as Phoenix grew, becoming more complex with each passing year. Initially, it was practical, I explained, choosing my words carefully. I wanted to build something on my own merit, without either the advantage or the burden of the Mitchell name. Then, as Phoenix succeeded, I realized I was getting a unique perspective, seeing how differently I was treated when perceived as a shop assistant versus a CEO. And what did you learn from this experiment? My father asked, his tone scathing. Met his gaze directly. That capability and potential are routinely misjudged based on preconceptions. Those assumptions about someone's intelligence or business acumen often say more about the person making those judgments than about their target. So this was all an elaborate psychology lesson, he scoffed. No, I replied quietly. This was me building something significant while you repeatedly told me I lacked the capacity to do so. The lesson is yours to take or leave. The table fell silent as my words landed. Even Walter and James looked uncomfortable, suddenly aware they were witnessing something far more personal than a business dispute. My mother squeezed my arm gently, then turned to my father. Richard, she's accomplished something remarkable. Whatever your business differences, surely as her father, you can acknowledge that. All eyes turned to him, waiting for his response. The moment hung suspended between us, an opportunity for reconciliation or for further division. His response would set the stage for everything that followed. My father looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The entire table waited in tense silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured but cold. What you've accomplished is undeniable, he said, each word carefully controlled. Building a successful investment firm requires skill and determination. But the methods you've chosen, he shook his head, reflect a fundamental lack of integrity. I kept my expression neutral despite the sting of his words. Some part of me had hoped, perhaps naively, that his pride in my achievement might outweigh his anger at the deception. You've deliberately misled your family for years, he continued, warming to his theme. You've listened to confidential business discussions at this very table while building a competing enterprise, and you've used the Mitchell name, my name, to open doors while pretending to reject everything it stands for. I've never traded on the Mitchell name, I countered. Phoenix was built entirely on its own merit. Is that so? He raised an eyebrow. Then why maintain the connection at all? Why not use your mother's maiden name if you were so determined to succeed independently? It was a fair question, one I had considered myself when establishing Phoenix. Because I am Mitchell, I replied simply. Denying that would have been just another form of deception. The point wasn't to pretend I wasn't your daughter. It was to prove I could succeed without leveraging that relationship. While simultaneously undermining my company, he added sharply, Phoenix competes with Mitchell Financial in some markets, I acknowledged. But that's business, not personal. Our growth hasn't come at your expense. We've expanded the overall market by reaching clients your traditional approach doesn't serve effectively. My father's expression hardened. You're the perfect example of wasted potential, he said, echoing the criticism he had leveled at me countless times over the years. Not because you lack business acumen, as I incorrectly believed, but because you've squandered the opportunity to build something with integrity. Something worthy of respect. The accusation hung in the air, its impact heightened by the audience around us. Walter and James shifted uncomfortably, while my siblings exchanged concerned glances. My mother looked painfully caught between her husband and daughter. I took a deep breath, maintaining my composure. Respect is earned through achievements, not granted based on appearances, I said, my voice steady. For 7 years, I've built a company that outperforms industry benchmarks, maintains exceptional client satisfaction, and provides fulfilling careers for over 70 people. If that hasn't earned your respect, then perhaps your definition is too narrowly drawn. Achievements built on deception. Built on execution, I interrupted, a rare occurrence at our family table. Phoenix succeeds because we deliver superior results, not because of any connection to you or your company. My father's face flushed slightly at being cut off. He opened his mouth to respond, but my phone rang, cutting through the tension. I glanced at the screen and saw Eliza's name. She wouldn't interrupt Thanksgiving dinner without good reason. Excuse me, I said, rising from the table. I need to take this. Of course you do, my father said sarcastically. Another critical inventory issue at the gift shop, no doubt. I ignored the barb and stepped into the hallway to answer the call. Eliza? What's happening? Sorry to interrupt your dinner, she said, her voice tense. But you need to know, Mitchell Financial just announced a merger with Westlake Group. It's being positioned as a direct counter to our Harrison acquisition. I processed this information quickly. Westlake was a mid-sized investment firm we had considered acquiring before focusing on Harrison. They specialized in high-net-worth clients with a traditional service approach that aligned well with Mitchell Financial's model. When was this arranged? I asked. That's the thing, Eliza replied. According to our sources, your father initiated discussions weeks ago, but accelerated the timeline after our Harrison announcement. They're presenting it as a strategic expansion, but the market is reading it as a defensive move. And it was announced today? On Thanksgiving? 20 minutes ago. They're clearly trying to recapture the news cycle. I thanked her and ended the call, taking a moment to gather my thoughts before returning to the dining room. My father's smug expression confirmed what I already suspected. The timing of the announcement had been deliberate, calculated to undermine our moment in the spotlight and reassert Mitchell Financial's dominance. Trouble at the shop? He asked innocently as I retook my seat. Interesting timing for the Westlake announcement, I replied evenly. Most companies avoid major business news on Thanksgiving. His smile was cold. When opportunity presents itself, decisive leaders act regardless of the calendar. And this decision was made. When, exactly? We've been exploring synergies with Westlake for some time, Walter supplied smoothly. Today's announcement simply formalizes that relationship, I nodded slowly. Congratulations. Westlake has a solid reputation with traditional high-net-worth clients. Their approach complements Mitchell Financial's existing services. My professional assessment seemed to irritate my father more than any emotional response would have. He had clearly expected me to appear surprised or threatened by the announcement. The combined entity will manage over $2 billion in assets, he stated pointedly. More than double Phoenix's portfolio. Size isn't everything, I countered calmly. Phoenix prioritizes innovation and client experience over raw numbers. Different approaches for different market segments. Derek cleared his throat awkwardly. Maybe we could discuss something other than business for a few minutes? It is Thanksgiving, after all. I agree, my mother said quickly. Veronica, how are preparations coming for the charity gala next month? But my father wasn't ready to release the tension. You know what I find most disappointing, Olivia? He asked, ignoring my mother's attempt to change the subject. Not that you built a competing firm, though that shows questionable judgment, but that you sat at this table year after year, accepting my concerns about your future, my offers of help, my connections, all while secretly believing yourself superior. I never thought myself superior, I corrected. Just different. With a different vision for what financial services could be. A vision you never bothered to share, he pointed out. Not with me, not with your family. Would you have listened? I asked quietly. When I tried to discuss emerging trends during my college years, you dismissed them as academic fantasies. When I presented innovation concepts during my internship, you called them distractions. At what point would you have actually considered my ideas on their merits rather than dismissing them because they came from me? The question silenced him momentarily, his expression suggesting it had struck home in a way my other comments hadn't. For the first time since the confrontation began, I saw a flicker of something beyond anger in his eyes, perhaps recognition, or even regret. Before he could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Harrison Capital final paperwork completed early. Press release scheduled for 9 a.m. Monday. Congratulations on closing our largest acquisition to date. The timing was perfect, almost too perfect to be coincidental. I looked up to find my father watching me closely, clearly trying to interpret my expression. Something you'd like to share with the table? He asked. I considered my father's question as I slipped my phone back into my pocket. This moment, this entire confrontation, had been building for 7 years. How it ended would define not just our personal relationship moving forward, but potentially the business dynamic between Phoenix and Mitchell Financial. Just a message from my team, I said calmly. The Harrison Capital acquisition has been finalized ahead of schedule. Congratulations, Derek offered genuinely. My father's expression remained impassive, though I noticed Walter and James exchange concerned glances. The expedited timeline suggested Phoenix was moving more aggressively than they had anticipated. Thank ye. You? I acknowledged. It's an important milestone for Phoenix. Well, my father said with forced casualness. While we're sharing business updates, I should mention that the Westlake merger positions Mitchell Financial to acquire Continental. Trust next quarter. I recognized the name immediately. Continental was a firm Phoenix had been quietly researching as a potential future acquisition target. My father was signaling that he intended to continue competing directly against my company, perhaps even more aggressively now. Continental is an excellent firm, I replied evenly. Their client base would certainly benefit from more innovative service offerings. The subtle dig wasn't lost on him. His jaw tightened momentarily before he replied, They value tradition and stability, qualities that have stood the test of time in our industry. The professional standoff continued through dessert, with pointed comments disguised as casual business observations. My mother made increasingly desperate attempts to steer the conversation toward neutral territory, while my siblings alternated between fascination and discomfort at witnessing this new dynamic between their father and sister. As coffee was served, my father leaned back in his chair, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I have a proposal, he announced abruptly. The table fell silent, all eyes turning toward him. Despite the unconventional circumstances, he continued, carefully, I believe there could be strategic value in collaboration between our firms. Walter looked startled by this unexpected pivot, while James maintained his practiced lawyer's composure. What kind of collaboration are you suggesting? I asked, genuinely curious. A strategic partnership in certain markets. Mitchell Financials. Established client relationships combined with Phoenix's technological infrastructure could create significant competitive advantage. The offer was surprising and undeniably tempting from a purely business perspective. Such a partnership would accelerate Phoenix's growth in traditional markets while enhancing Mitchell Financial's appeal to younger, tech-savvy clients. But I recognized the underlying strategy. If he couldn't beat me, he would try to absorb me. An interesting proposition, I acknowledged, though it would require a fundamental shift in Mitchell Financial's approach to client services. We're open to controlled innovation, Walter interjected, particularly if it enhances client outcomes without disrupting established relationships. I nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate the offer. It deserves careful consideration after the holidays. My father studied me, clearly trying to determine whether my response was genuine or merely diplomatic. Of course, he said finally. Business decisions shouldn't be made hastily, or at Thanksgiving dinner. As the meal concluded, the tension that had dominated the evening began to ease slightly. My father's executives departed with carefully worded pleasantries about family time, leaving just the immediate family in the living room. My mother, seizing the opportunity, turned to me with genuine curiosity. I'd love to hear more about Phoenix, Olivia. What made you decide to start your own firm? It was the first time anyone in my family had asked about the company I had built from a place of interest rather than confrontation. The simple question opened a flood of memories, the excitement of securing my first office space, the thrill of our first successful acquisition, the pride in building a team that shared my vision. As I began sharing the story, I noticed my father listening intently. From his armchair, his expression guarded but attentive. Derek and Veronica asked surprisingly insightful questions about Phoenix's business model and growth strategy. For perhaps the first time, I was speaking to my family as the professional I had become rather than the underachiever they had perceived. The hardest part, I admitted, wasn't building the business. It was maintaining the separation between my professional accomplishments and my personal life. That division became increasingly difficult to justify as Phoenix grew. Why maintain it? For so long? My mother asked gently. I glanced at my father before answering. Initially, it was about proving I could succeed entirely on my own terms. Then it became complicated. The longer I waited, the more difficult it became to find the right moment for revelation. And now? My father asked unexpectedly, his first direct question about my business that wasn't confrontational. Now the worlds have collided, I replied simply. For better or worse, O.E. Mitchell and Olivia Mitchell are finally the same person. As the evening drew to a close, I found myself alone with my father in his study. He poured 2 glasses of scotch, handing one to me without comment. You've built something impressive, he said finally, the admission clearly difficult for him. Your approach is different from mine, but the results are undeniable. Thank you, I replied, accepting both the drink and the grudging compliment. That means more than you might realize. He studied the amber liquid in his glass. I still think the deception was unnecessary and professionally questionable. Perhaps, I conceded. Though I wonder if Phoenix would exist at all if I'd tried. To build it under the weight of your expectations and judgment. His expression suggested the comment struck home, but he didn't deny it. Instead, he asked, What happens now? Between our companies? We compete where competition makes sense, I replied honestly. And perhaps collaborate where collaboration creates value, but as equals, not as parent and subsidiary. He nodded slowly. And personally? That's more complicated, I admitted. 7 years of pretending to be someone I'm not, of hearing your disappointment and dismissal, that can't be undone in a single Thanksgiving dinner. No, he agreed quietly. It can't. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of 7 years of deception and misunderstanding hanging between us. But perhaps, I added finally, we can build something new, something based on who we actually are, not who we assumed each other to be. As I drove home that night, my phone lit up with messages, updates from the Phoenix team about the Harrison integration, media inquiries about my double life, and finally, a text from my father. Continental Trust is still in play. May the best Mitchell win. I smiled despite myself. It wasn't reconciliation, not exactly, but it was acknowledgement of my capabilities, my achievement, and perhaps most importantly, my right to compete on the same playing field he had always considered. His exclusive domain. The family disappointment had revealed her hidden fortune, and in doing so, had rewritten not just her own narrative, but the story of what it meant to be a Mitchell. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.